Hello, my name is Judith and I'm 62 years old. I never imagined my life could change, or even end, without any warning. I always pictured the approach of death as a gradual experience, maybe in old age, perhaps with time to say my goodbyes. I thought it would come after a long illness or at least some kind of sign that things were going wrong. But that's not how it happened for me. One moment, everything was perfectly normal. The next moment, my entire world turned upside down. I'm sharing this story because I believe it could help someone out there. Someone who might be wondering about what comes after this life, or someone who feels a stirring in their heart, telling them the world is about to change. Whatever your situation, I hope my experience brings you insight, comfort, or at least a spark of understanding. This is the story of how I died, what I saw beyond, and why I believe there's still time for us to turn around before it's too late. It started as an ordinary morning. I woke up, brewed my coffee, and browsed through emails on my computer. The sky outside was overcast, but it felt calm. Just another day in a long stretch of many. Nothing seemed unusual. I had weekend plans with friends, plans that filled me with anticipation. I remember feeling a gentle happiness as I thought about what the next few days might hold. Little did I know, those simple thoughts would be the last normal moments I'd have for a very long time. Suddenly, a dull, nagging ache at the back of my head began to build. It was so slight at first that I brushed it off as eye strain or dehydration. But then, out of nowhere, the ache sharpened to a crushing pressure, like someone was squeezing my brain from inside my skull. My heart started pounding in a way that felt unnatural, a wild, stuttering rhythm that clashed with the calm I'd felt just moments before. I tried to steady myself, but my legs wobbled and refused to cooperate. My vision blurred at the edges, colors faded, and every sound seemed muffled. For a split second, I had the strange thought that maybe I was just tired, that if I took a deep breath, things would settle. But deep down, an alarming realization welled up. Something is seriously wrong. My knees gave way and I started to fall. I remember thinking I should brace myself for the hard impact against the floor. But no impact came. In that strange instant, I felt weightless, suspended between one heartbeat and the next. I expected a surge of panic, but instead there was an eerie stillness. Then I saw myself.
Then it happened.
My body was lying there on the floor, eyes closed, arms sprawled in an awkward angle. It looked so surreal, like I was watching a movie scene except the person on the floor was me. My skin was pale, my mouth slightly open as if frozen mid-breath. A weird calm rushed over me and I remember thinking, how am I looking at my body from the outside? Isn't this supposed to be impossible? Voices were shouting in the distance. I saw people running into the room. One bent down to check for a pulse. Another spoke rapidly into a radio. I could tell they were paramedics by their uniforms and the urgency in their voices. But all of that felt far away, like I was watching through a foggy window. I tried to call out to tell them, I'm still here. You're missing me. But no sound came from me. I had no voice, no hands, no physical form at all. I was just awareness. As I hovered there, feeling more helpless than I ever had in my entire life, a subtle tug began to move me away from my motionless body. This pull was gentle at first, but it became stronger, more insistent. The paramedics, the flashing lights, even my own still form, all of it started to fade. There was no sense of up or down, just an unstoppable momentum carrying me forward. Suddenly, everything went dark, a quiet nothingness that felt both terrifying and oddly peaceful. In the distance, a speck of light appeared. It grew bigger, brighter, and more intense, transforming into a tunnel of glowing radiance. This wasn't just light, it had an almost living presence. It reached out, inviting me, embracing me in a warmth I'd never known. Despite the comfort in that light, my thoughts spun in confusion. Was I dead? I realized that maybe I was. But that was the moment fear should have taken over, right? Surprisingly, the deeper I moved into the light, the calmer I felt. I knew I was leaving my physical life behind, yet all I sensed was an odd mixture of peace and awe. Emerging from that tunnel, I found myself in an endless expanse of illumination. It was soft, yet so incredibly vivid that words like bright or shining hardly do it justice. Every inch of space seemed to be made of this living light. I had no body, no weight, yet I was fully present, more aware than I had ever been when I was alive. Then I saw him. At first, he was just a figure standing in the distance, radiating a gentle brilliance that both drew me in and filled me with reverent awe. A name whispered in my mind, Jesus. Instantly, I felt a wave of recognition in my soul. It wasn't just an intellectual understanding. It was more like a memory I'd forgotten until that second. There was no doubt in me that this was Jesus. His presence was love itself, absolute, pure, unending love, the kind that melts every fear, every regret, every burden. And still, there was a profound sorrow in his eyes. It was the kind of sorrow someone has when they've witnessed heartbreak after heartbreak, century upon century. I wanted to speak, but words wouldn't form. My thoughts raced, this can't be real, can it? And yet, it was more real than anything I had ever experienced. Jesus looked at me, and just by that look, I felt known. Every secret, every hidden hurt, every triumph, every failure. I couldn't hide a thing. But there was no condemnation in his gaze, only truth and love, woven together in a way that filled me with both comfort and a sense of holy reverence. I heard my name, Judith, spoken in a voice that resonated through my entire being. Never had my name sounded like that, carrying meaning, acceptance, and a sense that he recognized every part of me. Then, calmly but firmly, he said, "You were not meant to die today." My mind buzzed with questions. What does that mean? Why am I here if I'm not supposed to die? Yet before I could form those thoughts into words, he answered with a gentle urgency, "There is something you must see." The scene around us changed in an instant. The warm radiance receded, and I felt like I was being swept into another place entirely. A heaviness filled the air, almost suffocating. I found myself in the middle of a city street, but it wasn't peaceful. People were protesting, yelling, pushing against each other in anger and desperation. Signs demanded justice, truth, an end to corruption. The noise was a roar that vibrated through my mind. Digital billboards flickered overhead, showing news anchors with urgent expressions. Headlines scrolling at the bottom read phrases like financial collapse and global unrest. Stock market charts plummeted, entire economies scrambled to contain the panic. People looked terrified, uncertain, ready to explode at the slightest provocation. Suddenly, I wasn't in the city anymore. My surroundings shifted again. I saw earthquakes ripping through landscapes, splitting highways in two. Buildings collapsed like toy blocks, and entire neighborhoods vanished under raging floods. People screamed, running in every direction, but there was nowhere safe to go. Hurricanes and storms tore through coastal towns, uprooting trees and swallowing homes. Fires raged, consuming forests and cities alike. Somehow, as I was shown these events, I sensed an unseen influence at work, an evil force feeding on fear and chaos. I heard whispers, not from the people but from something beneath the surface, fueling division and desperation. Leaders tried to speak to the crowds, but their words felt hollow, like they themselves didn't believe what they were saying. Governments reeled under the weight of financial chaos, natural disasters, and social upheaval, yet no one had real answers. Just as I thought I couldn't bear to see any more despair, the reality around me pulled me even deeper. I found myself witnessing events that weren't just physical. I sensed a spiritual warfare raging, an invisible battle between forces of light and darkness. It was happening everywhere, unseen but very real. Darkness slithered into everyday life, twisting truths, turning hearts cold, and making people believe lies that led them further away from anything good or holy. I saw churches crumbling, not because of physical destruction, but because their foundations had been built on convenience rather than real faith. Even believers were arguing over petty matters, forgetting the true enemy lurking in the shadows. Pride, arrogance, and petty disputes blinded them to the bigger picture. Meanwhile, a small remnant of faithful people stood firm, praying in secret, determined to hold on to hope. I could almost feel their prayers rising like small beacons in a vast sea of darkness. It was then that Jesus' voice came again, calm yet carrying an undeniable weight. The world stands at a crossroads. As I listened, the turmoil around me froze, like time had paused mid-chaos. Jesus lifted his hand, and the scene shifted once more. First, I saw a vision of a brighter future, where people chose love, humility, and a genuine return to faith. Families were restored, communities worked together, and there was a renewed sense of unity. The earth itself seemed calmer, with fewer of those catastrophic events. There was still struggle, but it was met with resilience and compassion instead of division. Then, in the blink of an eye, I saw a different possibility, a future where nothing changed in the hearts of humanity. The disasters became more extreme, the anger more vicious, the confusion more suffocating. Governments collapsed entirely, and people fought not just over politics but for basic survival. Darkness spread until it felt almost physical, an infection covering every corner. People turned on each other, consumed by fear and desperation. My heart clenched. I could barely breathe as I realized the choice was ours. The path we take hinges on whether we heed the warnings or ignore them. Jesus' sorrowful but steady voice echoed, "Time is running out, but the choice is still open." Everything made sense in that moment. It wasn't about just one nation or one leader. It was about the spiritual condition of humanity. Pride, selfishness, greed, hatred. These were diseases of the soul, manifesting outwardly in every institution and relationship. The solution wasn't purely political or environmental. It was spiritual at its core. Without humbly turning back to Jesus, turning back to genuine love and truth, nothing would stop the chain reaction of destruction. I felt urgency grip my heart, like a physical ache in my chest. Can it be stopped? I asked, or maybe I only thought it. Jesus turned to me, and with eyes filled with both love and an indescribable weight, he replied, "Return to me. Repent, turn away from sin, from arrogance, from hatred. Choose me, choose love, and warn others to do the same." A quiet hope flickered inside me. The future wasn't set in stone. There was still room to change, to prevent the worst outcomes. But that flicker was overshadowed by fear. Would people listen? Could I, a simple person, make a difference? Before I could protest or ask more questions, the radiant world around me shifted again. The warm glow faded, and I felt a swift jolt pulling me away from Jesus' presence. I panicked, wanting to stay in that realm of pure love, but there was no resisting the force dragging me back. My vision blurred into a tunnel of light, and the next thing I knew, I slammed into my body with a burst of searing pain. The first thing I felt was agony. My head throbbed as if it had been split open, my chest ached like it was being crushed. I heard the beeping of machines, hushed voices, and the rustling of medical personnel moving around me. My lungs burned as I sucked in a labored breath, my body convulsing from the shock of returning to life. Blinking against bright hospital lights, I tried to focus on the figures around me. Doctors, nurses, and my family stood there, looks of disbelief etched on their faces. I heard one doctor say, "This is impossible," while another checked the monitor with trembling hands. But deep down, I knew exactly what had happened. I had been sent back to deliver a warning, to share what I'd seen. Over the following days, I learned the medical details. I'd suffered a sudden, severe brain aneurysm. My heart had stopped. There was no pulse, no oxygen to my brain. The doctors had fought to revive me, but they eventually had to face the likelihood that I was gone. Then, as if by miracle, my heart started beating again. They called it a medical anomaly or a once-in-a-lifetime event. But I knew there was more to it than they could explain. At first, I couldn't even gather the strength to speak. My entire body felt like it had been run over. But my mind raced with the visions I had seen. The two paths for our world, the spiritual battle raging behind the scenes, and the heartbreak on Jesus' face as he pleaded for people to return to him. I realized my life would never be the same after what I'd witnessed. I had a mission, one that terrified me because I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. When I finally regained enough strength, I started to tell my family what happened. Some were wide-eyed, asking quiet questions. Others tried to be supportive but looked skeptical. My doctors listened politely, chalking it up to the brain's response to trauma. Friends offered different reactions. Some were intrigued, some politely dismissed it, and some outright mocked it. I had to accept that not everyone would be open to hearing about a near-death experience that involved a vision of the future and a call to spiritual change. But I also found that some people, quiet souls, leaned in with tears in their eyes. They admitted they had sensed something was off in the world, that recent events felt like a grim warning. They yearned to know more, to understand the deeper meaning behind the turmoil we see. Bit by bit, I realized that my job wasn't to convince people. It was to share. Some hearts were ready, others were not. And that's okay. My responsibility was simply to tell the truth of what I had witnessed and felt. I wish I could say the events I saw were decades away, but that's not the sense I was given. The year I glimpsed, March 2025, was emphasized as only the beginning of greater upheaval. I didn't see specific dates for each disaster or crisis, but the overall message was clear. We're edging closer to a tipping point. The deception is growing, the spiritual battle intensifying, and so many people remain unaware. This isn't about which side of the political aisle you're on. It's not about whether one country is better than another. This is about our souls, our hearts, our fundamental relationship with God and with each other. If we continue down a path of selfishness and pride, the consequences will be global and devastating. Yet, the most critical piece of this message is not meant to sow fear, but to plant hope. Jesus sent me back not to paralyze people with terror, but to offer a lifeline. He wants us to know that He's real, that He loves us beyond any measure, and that he's giving us one more chance, maybe many chances, to recognize the signs and return to him.
As if a door had slammed shut behind me. I gasped, my eyes snapping open to a cacophony of voices and the beeping of machines. A wave of intense pain crashed over me, and I realized I was back in my physical body, lying in a hospital bed. Doctors and nurses crowded around me, their eyes wide with shock. One doctor whispered, "He was gone for 7 minutes. I don't understand how he's back." Fragments of frantic conversation swirled around me. No heartbeat. We did everything we could. It's impossible. Impossible to them, maybe. But I remembered every second of what had happened. I had died, and Jesus had sent me back. And I returned with a message I could never keep to myself. In the days and weeks that followed, I struggled to share my experience. When I spoke about the visions and what Jesus had revealed to me, some believed. Others dismissed it as hallucination or a trauma-induced delusion. Even some believers in my life were skeptical, unwilling to consider that the prophecies about a one-world system could be unfolding faster than we imagined. Yet, as time passed, everything Jesus showed me continued to align with real-world events. Governments rolling out advanced digital IDs, microchips being marketed for convenience, and society growing increasingly dependent on technology. Not every new innovation is inherently evil, but the potential for global control and manipulation is undeniable, and many are walking into it without a second thought. It's not easy. People don't want to hear warnings. They dismiss them as paranoia, conspiracy, or fear-mongering. They cling to comforting lies rather than face uncomfortable truths. But I can't stay silent. I know what I saw, I know who I encountered, and I know the choice that's coming for humanity.